You have not been forgotten. You are being prepared. Why does it always seem that those who do everything right are left behind? Have you ever found yourself gazing at the heavens, questioning, God, have you forgotten about me? This isn't a theological quandary. It's a muffled cry from someone who has wept their prayers. It's the ache of planting faith only to harvest silence, of believing, yet still witnessing doors slam shut. This is where Psalm 37 emerges as a living response, not with instant promises, but with a roadmap. David writes, not from victory, but from the heart of waiting. He commences by saying, fret not thyself because of evildoers, neither be thou envious against the workers of iniquity. You have not been forgotten. You are being prepared. Albim through comparison is a silent venom. It creeps in unnoticed and begins to erode your faith from the inside out. You begin trusting, but when you glance sideways and see someone succeeding before you, something within unravels. Doubt, disguised as discouragement, arises. Am I praying incorrectly? Or has God forgotten me? But Psalm 37 immediately alerts us. Fret not thyself because of evildoers, neither be thou envious against the workers of iniquity. This phrase is not judgment. It's vibrational protection. Comparison doesn't propel you forward. It disconnects you from your purpose. And no one reaps flowers when they sow resentment. You have not been forgotten. You are being prepared. The soul that compares loses sensitivity to its own process. You start treading paths that aren't yours, attempting to live lives that don't belong to you. And when that happens, the energy of your devotion dissipates. Napoleon Hill used to say, comparison blocks burning desire, because you cease to desire with your soul and begin to pursue with envy. Pure desire creates, envy paralyzes. And what God has for you isn't in someone else's display case. It's in the roots He's silently forming within you. Faith begins to wither when you try to understand God's logic through human eyes. But the psalm guarantees, for they shall soon be cut down like the grass and wither as the green herb. In other words, what shines without roots soon fades. God's justice does not fail. It simply has its own timing. And while the wicked seem to flourish rapidly, God is digging deep foundations within you. Because a promise without a foundation becomes a downfall, and a blessing without maturity becomes a curse. Therefore, do not rush trying to keep pace with others. Learn to honor your own rhythm. You must remember that your time is sacrosanct. To compare oneself to others is to dishonor one's own trajectory. It's akin to devaluing the very ground in which you were sown. Yet, as the psalm also states, trust in the Lord and do good. In other words, while the world clamors for external validation, you are called to cultivate in stillness. And when you cultivate with integrity, the harvest arrives in abundance. True prosperity isn't about what impresses the eyes of others. It's what fills your soul with tranquility. And peace never takes root where envy resides. As Joe Dispenza elucidates, when we fixate on the success of others with a sense of inadequacy, the brain activates regions associated with scarcity and rejection. Your body vibrates as if it were losing, even when nothing is being taken from you. This creates an internal field of self-deprecation, and the miracle begins to be delayed. Why? Because you are vibrating with lack, not gratitude. You are gazing outward instead of honoring what has already been birthed within. Comparison diverts, but gratitude aligns. Thus, I now invite you, look inward, breathe deeply, and declare with conviction, what is mine will come, at the appointed time, at the correct frequency, on my path. Return to your center, acknowledge what has already been healed, because only those who honor the present possess the authority to receive the future. And if this resonated with you, write in the comments, I used to compare myself, but now I align. For this declaration is more than a confession, it's a spiritual repositioning. There exists a faith that bleeds in silence. It is not the faith of the masses nor of illuminated altars. It is the faith of those who have already prayed with a depleted soul and persevered nonetheless. It is the faith of those who have no more words, yet still bend their knees. The faith of those who have lost everything, save the hope that God is still penning the final chapter. David knew this intimately. That's why he wrote, "Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and cultivate faithfulness." It is not a condition, it is a promise. But before the visible sustenance arrives, comes the invisible act of continuing to trust while everything appears to crumble. You have not been forgotten. You are being prepared. Bruce Lipton, in The Biology of Belief, demonstrated that our body responds physiologically to our deepest beliefs. In other words, even when everything external is in crisis, if you persist in trusting, your body begins to regenerate. Faith doesn't just heal the spirit, it heals the physical, the mind, the emotions. Genuine trust places you in a mode of reconstruction, even without visible results. When you believe, even without seeing, your body understands that it is safe. And where there is safety, there is healing. Where there is healing, there is harvest. But what if time passes and nothing changes? It is here that many give up, not from a lack of faith, but from an excess of accumulated frustration. The soul begins to associate waiting with abandonment, silence with disdain. But Psalm 37 is a sacred cry that proclaims, "Dwell in the land, and you shall be truly fed." This land is not geographical, it is spiritual. It is the internal space where you decide to trust even when you have no further reason. And when you inhabit this land, God feeds you in ways that the world does not comprehend. The faith that survives the silence is the faith that carries the code of the miracle. Because the miracle is never born on the stage, it is born in the backstage of pain. When you say, "I feel nothing anymore, but I continue to believe," heaven moves. Joe Dispenza calls this state emotional quantum coherence. It is when you align thought, feeling, and action into a single intention, and the universe, or the spirit, responds to coherence, not to noise. What you need is not to shout louder, it is to trust deeper. And here is the secret. You don't need to feel to continue. You only need to decide. Decide that God is still good, that the process still has purpose, that even while bleeding, you will plant. Because those who plant in the dark reap where no one expects. You don't need to display strength. You only need to not give up. Only the translated text. For it is faith that perseveres without a claim that underpins miracles no one can pilfer. If this is your season of silence, transform it into your altar. Pray softly, yet with profound faith. Declare now with eyes closed, "Even if it hurts, I persist in trusting." And in the comments, inscribe, "I continue to trust even in the silence." For God hears even what you can no longer articulate, and He transmutes even the tears unseen by all. The waiting is the crucible where God molds the unseen. Waiting is one of the most demanding spiritual exercises of the soul. It is not impatient waiting, counting the days. It is active waiting, the kind that trusts even without a timetable. It is the place where your identity is tested. Psalm 37 declares, "Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for Him. Do not fret." This rest is not inertia. It is vibrational surrender. It is the confidence that even when nothing happens in the visible realm, the invisible is already being shaped with divine precision. And those who learn to rest do not become paralyzed. They flourish from within. You have not been forgotten. You are being prepared. David Hawkins demonstrated in his scale of consciousness that the frequency of true trust vibrates above 400 hertz. It is the field where miracles begin to become possible. Waiting, when lived well, elevates the vibration of the being. It transforms anxiety into presence, scarcity into gratitude, despair into peace. God's time is not chronological, it is surgical. He does not delay, he calibrates. And what is taking time may be exactly what is being most carefully honed. But the human soul craves urgency. It wants signs. It wants movement. And when nothing happens, the questioning begins. Has God forgotten me? No. What he is doing now is structuring the version of you that will be capable of sustaining what you have asked for. Because blessings without preparation turn into burdens. And heaven does not deliver treasures to fragile hearts. It strengthens first. It molds in the dark. It refines in silence. And when you are ready, everything will happen at once. Waiting with wisdom is different from waiting with weariness. Weariness paralyzes. Wisdom prepares. The psalm says, "The meek will inherit the earth and delight in the abundance of peace." This meekness is the spiritual posture of those who have chosen to rest without giving up, of those who have transformed the time of waiting into a time of inner construction. Those who learn to wait well arrive prepared. Those who despair in the process lose their direction. You don't need more time, you need more trust. The waiting only hurts when it is filled with demands. But when you release the demands, time becomes a seed, and each day of waiting becomes fertilizer for the miracle that is being born within you.
The invisible acts at the frequency of vibrational patience, and the spiritual field responds to those who know how to wait with purpose. Now breathe. Close your eyes and say with intention, "Time is molding me. God is preparing me." And write in the comments, "I await with unwavering confidence, not with undue haste."
For there are harvests that only come to fruition after the seed has fully matured, and God does not squander that which he lovingly cultivates. Surrender is not relinquishment. It is the aperture through which miracles manifest. Submission is not an ending. It is the genesis of transformation. It is the moment you finally relinquish the reins and permit the divine to intercede where your own reach is inadequate. David penned, "Commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will act." This "will act" is not a mere possibility. It is a spiritual certainty. However, it only materializes when you genuinely surrender, not merely with words, but with palpable energy, with a heart completely yielded. You have not been forsaken. You are undergoing preparation. A businessman, following years of thwarted endeavors and escalating debt, elected to cease his striving. He did not abandon his aspirations, but he ceased his attempts to micromanage every facet. In tears, he knelt and uttered, "Lord, if it is not destined to unfold as I desire, may it be according to your will." In the ensuing months, he altered his demeanor, his daily regimen, his very essence. He commenced assisting fledgling entrepreneurs without remuneration. It was within this gesture of unfeigned generosity that an unexpected proposition materialized. Today, he proclaims, "The door only unlocked when I released the handle. You want to see in order to believe, but God wants you to believe in order to see." This is the inverted logic of the kingdom. Everything great is born in the unseen. The psalmist affirms, "The Lord makes firm the steps of the good man and delights in his way." In other words, you may not see it now, but your steps are already being aligned. While you question, heaven orchestrates. While you sleep, the unseen constructs. But to perceive this, you need to change the lens of your soul. You have not been forgotten. You are being prepared. The seed does not grow under spotlights. It germinates in the dark, silently, hidden beneath the earth. And even without applause, it fulfills its calling to flourish. So too is the spiritual process. God does not need to show you in order to be acting. In truth, the more hidden it seems, the deeper the construction. And true faith is that which can say, I believe even without any sign. Neville Goddard taught, "You are already that which you desire. You only need to remember. To remember is to feel now what has not yet arrived. It is to act as one who has already received. It is to vibrate as one who has already triumphed. It is not about illusion, it is about expansion, because the Spirit already dwells in the time of the promise. It is the mind that needs to be trained to inhabit this same space. When you align yourself with this internal reality, the unseen begins to reveal itself. Joe Dispenza calls this the intentional collapse of the quantum wave. It is when emotion, thought, and action become coherent, and the field responds. The unseen acts where there is vibrational coherence. In other words, it is useless to ask with your mouth and doubt with your heart. You need to vibrate as one who already has. Think, give thanks, act as one who has already received, and not for performance, but for spiritual conviction. A young man struggled against an illness for years. Tired of asking, one day he decided to act as if he were already healed. He began to give thanks before his appointments, to walk with gratitude, to speak as someone healthy. Nothing changed initially, but something within him began to flourish. Peace, lightness, real faith. Months later, the exams revealed what no one expected: total remission. Today, he says, "My healing began when I stopped asking and began to believe in the unseen." So now I invite you to a practical gesture. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and visualize your miracle as already realized. Feel the emotion of victory, of freedom, of the answer arriving. Now say, "The unseen is at work. The sky is shifting." And write in the comments, "I trust in the unseen, for the unseen is shaping me." For there are answers that only manifest when you vibrate as though you have already received them. You pray, you fast, you trust, yet you still compare yourself to others. You see someone achieve success and think, "What about me?" This question seems innocuous, but it carries immense spiritual weight. Comparison is like a subtle poison. It doesn't kill you outright, but it slowly withers your presence. It's like trying to run while looking sideways. You lose your rhythm, you stumble, you disconnect from your own path. Psalm 37 warns us, "Do not fret because of those who are evil," not because God wants to restrict you, but because envy closes the field where miracles happen. You haven't been forgotten. You are being prepared. Imagine trying to tune into radio station 105.3 while simultaneously listening to 92.9. It's impossible. It's noise. It's interference. Comparing yourself to others is just that. Attempting to live your own frequency with someone else's signal interfering. And when there's interference, what you hear is no longer clear. It's emotional noise. Comparison silences gratitude and amplifies the echo of dissatisfaction. You stop seeing what you have because you're too busy looking at what someone else has received. And faith doesn't flourish in distracted eyes. Neuroscience shows that comparison activates the brain's threat system, the same mechanism as physical pain. You feel pain, real pain, when you perceive yourself as behind or lesser than others. This dysregulates your prefrontal cortex, the area of decision-making, and blocks the reward system, dopamine. The result? You become paralyzed. You become insecure, unproductive, demotivated. And even while praying, your vibration is one of scarcity, not confidence. Joe Dispenza states, "Your body doesn't distinguish between reality and imagination. It responds to what you feel. And what you feel while comparing yourself is not faith, it is lack." Saul is the classic example of this. He was anointed, chosen, empowered. But it was enough to hear the people say that David has slain his 10,000s for everything to fall apart. He lost the throne, not to David, but to his internal comparison. Meanwhile, David followed his own rhythm, playing the harp, serving, taking care of sheep. David flourished because he didn't try to be Saul, and God exalts those who remain faithful to their own process. The soul only flourishes when it releases hidden envy. Lucia, a therapist who saw everyone else growing online, silently compared herself. She didn't express overt envy, but her soul was tired of seeing others get there. One day, in a devotional, she heard something inside her. You are trying to be who you are not. She fasted from social media, returned to her purpose, and rewrote her mission. In a month, clients materialized. No advertising, no exertion. Today she proclaims, I flourished when I ceased to gauge myself against others. This is the quiet remedy for comparison. Returning to your own ground, your own time, your own horizon. Now, a practice. Procure paper and pen. List 3 blessings you already possess, small or grand. Bless them with verbal gratitude. I honor what is mine. Subsequently, contemplate someone you've silently envied, and then declare, their triumph does not diminish mine. I celebrate what is theirs, and I trust in what is mine. Finally, in the comments, write, I celebrate the other, because I trust in my own trajectory. Because those who celebrate expand, those who envy contract. Resentment is the thief of miracles. Have you ever tried to trust, yet deep down harbor grievances from the past? Perhaps your anger isn't directed at God, but at how life has unfolded, at the doors that didn't open, at the people who left you, at what you deserved but didn't receive, and at what came but caused you pain. This resentment is invisible, yet it vibrates powerfully enough to shut down the spiritual field. David knew this. That's why he wrote in Psalm 37, refrain from anger and forsake wrath. Do not fret. It leads only to evil. You have not been forgotten. You are being prepared. Resentment is a form of praying with anger. It's when you continue to pray but with a bitter heart. You continue to serve but with open wounds. You continue to declare but without truly trusting. And this isn't weakness, it's humanity. But the problem is that accumulated grievances block the flow of faith, and faith only moves when the heart is disarmed. David Hawkins, in his Scale of Consciousness, proved that emotions like guilt, shame, and rancor vibrate below 150 hertz. In this state, the body enters defense mode, and the soul enters survival mode. In other words, you may pray, but the field is closed. You may believe, but you vibrate with distrust. You may hope, but you are poisoned from within. And Psalm 37 reveals, the salvation of the righteous is from the Lord. He is their stronghold in the time of trouble. A stronghold isn't a hiding place. It's where you are restored to trust again. Leticia, a woman who was betrayed by her husband after 12 years of marriage, spent years praying for justice. But in silence, she carried anger, pain, and a trapped cry. Why did God allow this? It was at a spiritual retreat that she understood that her prayer was not being heard because her pain was shouting louder. She then did something radical. She stopped asking for justice and began asking for healing. She started writing letters of forgiveness, not to him, but to liberate herself. A few months later, something began to change. She started sleeping again. She started smiling again. Today she says, the greatest miracle was recovering my peace. The blessing came when I released the poison. So I ask you, what is still bleeding inside you? What story do you still repeat with pain? Which person do you still judge in silence every time you pray? Perhaps what you need most isn't for God to correct the other person, but for Him to set you free. Because resentment doesn't protect, it imprisons. And releasing is not forgetting. It's choosing not to carry it anymore. Not for them, but for you. For your healing. For your frequency. Now practice with sincerity. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and bring to mind anyone toward whom you still harbor pain. Visualize that pain as a dark smoke emanating from your chest, and silently state, I release you. I liberate myself. I allow myself to flourish. Repeat until you feel lightness. You needn't feel forgiveness. You only need to desire freedom. Afterward, write in the comments, I release to live. I let go to flourish. Because your next harvest will not come in the terrain of resentment. It requires clean soil, and that soil begins with your affirmation of healing. Some individuals strive for prosperity, yet simultaneously devalue themselves. They desire to receive, but harbor an underlying belief of unworthiness. They yearn to reap rewards, yet sabotage themselves with scarcity-driven thoughts. David proclaims, better is a little with righteousness than great revenues with injustice. Thriving in the kingdom isn't about accumulation, it's about possessing with peace. It's understanding that a modicum of truth is more potent than a plethora of falsehood. It's about living with vibrational dignity. You haven't been forgotten. You are being prepared. Joe Dispenza elucidates that prosperity originates in the frequency of gratitude preceding attainment. You express gratitude, and the brain interprets it as already received. This emotional anticipation engenders a cascade of possibilities. Reality begins to align with the inner image. Therefore, when you give thanks in advance, you cultivate the fertile ground for the harvest. It's not about deserving, it's about attunement. And the righteous thrive because they already vibrate as those who possess. You must shift your frequency, not your request. Some have been praying for the same miracle for years, yet the heavens remain silent. This isn't because God is distant. It's because the frequency hasn't aligned. The question that needs to resonate isn't, will he hear me? But rather, does my vibration today sustain what I am requesting? David declares, the Lord knows the days of the upright, and their inheritance shall be forever. Inheritance isn't something demanded, it's something carried with maturity. And God, as a father, only bestows what you can already sustain. You haven't been forgotten, you are being prepared. David Hawkins, in his Scale of Consciousness, teaches that desires laden with fear or victimhood vibrate low, below 200 hertz, and anything that vibrates below that level generates blockage, self-sabotage, and delays. In other words, even when you pray, if the emotion is one of lack, the field locks. Many clamor for blessings but remain rooted in the identity of the victim. They desire abundance yet vibrate scarcity. They crave love yet still punish themselves internally. And the spiritual field, like the quantum field, responds not to the request, but to the soul's true frequency. One man spent years praying for a promotion. He was faithful, disciplined, but the position never materialized. Until one day, during a devotional, he wrote, "What is preventing what I want? Is it me?" He realized that, internally, he carried a fear of assuming responsibility, of making mistakes, of being perceived. He then began to cultivate his confidence, his communication, and his inner worth. 2 months hence, the same company promoted him, but he no longer prayed for it. He prayed for courage, for maturity, for alignment. And the miracle arrived in the time frame of his new version. You may be petitioning for healing, yet still nourish yourself with bitter thoughts. You may be pleading for prosperity, yet continue to demean yourself. You may be seeking reconciliation, yet still feel unworthy of love. Thus, I pose the question, is what you are requesting truly compatible with who you are becoming? This is a perilous question, because it exposes what still needs to perish for the new to be born. But it is also a liberating question, because it returns the key to your hands, the key to inner transformation, to vibrational identity, to faith transmuted into action. Neville Goddard used to say, "You do not attract what you want, you attract what you are." In other words, it's not sufficient to visualize the miracle. You must embody the version that already possesses it. Speak like that version, think like that version, walk like that version. Because miracles are not happenstance. They are the consequence of vibrational alignment. And when your identity vibrates at the frequency of that which you desire, the request becomes an attraction. You don't need to chase after it. You simply become magnetic, and what is yours finds its way to you. Now close your eyes for a moment. Visualize that which you are waiting for, and ask yourself honestly, am I vibrating as someone who already possesses this? If the answer is no, celebrate. You found the key. If yes, trust. You are closer than you think. And declare in the comments, I become what I ask for. I vibrate what I desire. Because when the identity shifts, the heavens manifest without resistance. The heavens appear mute. Prayers seem to reverberate against invisible walls. You look around and witness people succeeding, reaping, celebrating, while you simply wait. You wait for answers, for signs, for a touch from above. It is in this place that many conclude, God has forgotten me. But Psalm 37 firmly responds, the Lord does not forsake his saints. They are preserved forever. To preserve is not to deny. It is to guard while the structure is molded. You have not been forgotten. You are being prepared. There is a type of silence that is absence, but there is another that is strategy. The silence of God often is the room where he strengthens his soldiers without an audience. While you feel abandoned, God is fortifying your foundations. He hides the gold before revealing it to the world, and only those who understand the value of waiting are worthy of the promise. Because the promise without preparation becomes a fall, and God loves too much to expose you before your time. Moses was forgotten in the desert. David was forgotten in the pasture. Hannah was forgotten in the temple. But none of them were truly forgotten. They were being prepared. God hid them to heal them, to strengthen them, to silence internal noises. And when the right time came, they didn't just appear, they sustained what they received. The blessing was not an accident. It was a consequence of a well-lived process, and the same may be happening to you now. A man named Elias dreamed of leading a social project. For years he prayed, planned, dreamed, and nothing happened. He came to think that God had rejected him. But one day he prayed differently. Lord, what if I am the project? He started with what he had: a bicycle, 2 volunteers, and many no's. But he maintained faith, even without external validation. Today he leads a recognized impact network and says, when I stopped waiting for the mission, I discovered that I was the mission. The silence of God is also a lesson about presence, about trusting without signs, about walking without a trail, about loving without immediate return. The psalm also declares, wait on the Lord and keep his way, and he will exalt you to inherit the land. This land is not a geographical place. It is a state of consciousness where you inhabit your promise with peace. But no one inherits the land with a fragmented soul. Therefore, before exaltation, God allows the hiding. Before the harvest, he allows the silence. But the silence is never empty when God is there. Now, breathe with intention. Place your hand upon your heart and declare with seasoned faith, even without hearing, I persist in trusting. God's silence is a form of construction. Then, in the comments, inscribe, I am shielded in the unseen. I am fortified in the silence. For there are blessings not being withheld, but rather being safeguarded. And God's timing does not lag. He is cultivating the miracle so that you will not forfeit it upon its arrival. You don't need to comprehend. Just trust. Everything you've heard thus far isn't mere theory. It's spiritual seed being sown into your vibrational field. And now it's your turn to choose. Continue striving to control, or finally repose in God's timing. Because trust is the bridge between the unseen and reality. Commit your way to the Lord, trust in Him, and He will do this. Everything, not some, not perhaps, but everything. Declare now, I release, I trust, I receive. And if this resonated with you, write in the comments, I rest in God's timing. This isn't merely a phrase, it's a vibrational covenant. Because when you declare, heaven listens, and the unseen begins to stir.